how they spelled things, because they weren't as educated. Yeah. So they spelled.
Good afternoon. I'm Christine Taylor Lewis, and on behalf of the Afro-American Historical Association of Fauquier County, I thank you for your support, and I welcome you to this, our sixth in a series of conversations with family historians and others who will share their genealogy research or provide information related to local African-American history. Now, part of our mission here at AAHA is to collect, to document, preserve, and share U.S. history with a focus on the African-Americans here in Fauquier County. Our hope is that through these Zoom calls, there will be a bridge or a gateway to some of the extensive collection of information that we have here at AAHA, in our museum, in our library, at our research room here, as well as the various social media outlets such as Facebook and YouTube, and of course our website. So remember to visit us at aahafauquier.org. Now, we also want to take this time to once again acknowledge Women's History Month, which has been set aside to celebrate the contributions and specific achievements that women have made in various fields over the course of American history. For information related to exhibitions, collections, and special events, I would encourage you to visit the webpage womenhistorymonth.gov. That is womenshistorymonth.gov. And I'd like to give a special shout out to Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, who is at this very hour being interviewed at a confirmation hearing to become the first African-American woman to sit on the Supreme Court of the United States. Let's give her a round of applause. All women everywhere, happy Women's History Month. Now, for over a year and a half, the AAHA team has been involved in a project called Know Their Names, in which the goal is to accurately document every person ever enslaved in Fauquier County. To this end, today's guests came on board not only with a constant flow of new names, but also with interesting history associated with those names. During this meeting, they will talk to us about how their work on the Know Their Names project has revealed a shared history between the two of them. So it is with much delight that I introduce to you Jim Stribling and Darlene King Green. Hello.
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 And welcome. We're so excited to have you today. And we know you have just a wealth of information to share with us about the community, and we can't wait to hear it.
Thank you.
By way of introduction, Jim Stribling is a resident of Markham, as his ancestors have been for generations. He is retired from the defense contracting business and stays active farming in the community and with Leeds Episcopal Church. Darlene King Green is a resident of Hume, and her ancestors have been residents of Fauquier County since the Revolutionary War. She is a retired social services worker and stays busy working with the homeless and with Mount Morris Baptist Church. So again, I say welcome you two, and we know that you have a lot to tell us, so I'll just get on with the questions. Now, both of you have a direct connection to the Mountain View Farm of Markham, which was established in the early 1700s, and it's now known as Stribling Orchard. So tell us
You're muted. We can't hear you.
All right, now about the slide piece.
So let's slides. Mhm.
Sorry, we're working through the technology. We're gonna be back in business. Beautiful.
Okay.
So thank you. Thank you. So I'll just read, go over my question one more time for those who might have missed it. As I was saying, that both of you have a direct connection to Markham, to the Mountain View farm there.
Mhm.
And it was established in the early 1700s. And it's known as Stribling Orchard. So I'm asking you to just tell us about your connection with that farm.
So I think we have the slide up. So that's the picture of the farm right there. So Darlene was
Well,
talking
the
about-
reason why this is important is because this is the plantation at the time that my ancestor, Windsor King, passed away at. And also this is I was fortunate enough to be able to go there and tour all the different buildings that's still standing on that farm now.
Okay.
So like on the right, you're looking at it, that's the slave quarters. The one in the center with the kind of dome-shaped roof is the
it's the meat house.
And then this one that's closer to the left is the kitchen. And that also served as a living quarters for the people who worked in the kitchen.
Okay.
So all those buildings are still standing, and I was fortunate enough to be able to go tour them. And it was just kind of surreal to be there, to know that at one time my ancestors worked on this plantation. I think it's important to say Windsor King passed away on this plantation, but he was not a slave on this plantation.
So this is now the home of Rob and Stacia Stribling, and they've been very gracious and really enjoy having people up. Do we need to pause for a moment, or are we good?
It's not showing on the other people's screen for some reason.
That's all we want to see.
Bear with us.
It's not doing the video.
So we'll talk. So it's Mountain View is now the home of Rob and Stacia Stribling, and 6 generations of Striblings that have farmed there for 200 years. Darlene and I came together is basically through my father, Bill, who gathered together all of the archives. So a family living in a house for 200 years, you can imagine that stuffed in the attic and closets and desks and everywhere are old papers. So he was very interested in that and kind of made it his life's passion to pull together these archives. And if we can, I'll show you later. We have some examples here, but that's what Darlene and I have been working on, and that's how Darlene got connected to the family in the first place.
Right. So his father, like he said, Bill, had collected all this information, and he was so gracious in sharing everything that he had with me. I mean, it was just volumes. So because of the information he was able to give me, I was able to take that information and investigate a little bit more. So if it were not for Bill Stribling, I would not have this information, and I'm so grateful. Yeah.
We're thankful for him.
So here is my father, Bill, and want to give him the shout out. So between my father, Bill, and Dennis King and Darlene, they got us 90% of the way there. And then when Karen started and you all started the Know Their Names project, I saw it in the newspaper. And the second I saw that, I was like, we have got to do this. And I got on the phone and called Darlene and said, Darlene, we have got to do this. We've got so much information. We've got to make this available. So we've been working for, I don't know, for
a couple of years,
for over a year, but
Yeah.
I'm telling you, we've scratched the surface in the archives, and we got more to do, but we'll try and share some of that.
That's great. That's great information.
And it's not just the King family. A slide up here is the Gaskins family. And I can tell you, Karen was mighty excited when we saw this in the ledger book, because she's on the other side of the room. Tell me, Karen, is it third great grandfather? Third?
Yes, Hezekiah is my third.
Hezekiah, Karen's third great grandfather in the ledger books of the Stribling family. And you'll note some of the highlights there. It states free man, and it shows the work over 20 years. The Striblings, the doctors, and Hezekiah, and then Moses, I guess, were stonemasons, and they were doing business back and forth, over 20 years as neighbors and working with each other. So it's just an example of we'll see the Washington family, but now we're going to jump into the King. And as Darlene said, all roads lead to Windsor King, and Darlene had asked papers, and we started this project, and all of a sudden Windsor's in there everywhere.
Right. So this is Windsor's death certificate. And as you can see that he passed away at the Stribling Orchard, the Mountain View Farm. And at that time, he was like 93 years old. Or it's not, 93 years old. And which means that he was born before the Revolutionary War.
That's right.
Now they do indicate here that he had a former owner who is A.A. Ashby, and we'll get into that later on.
Right.
We don't know how long Ashby owned Windsor, because the information we have, it shows that if he was enslaved, he sure had a lot of autonomy. He could move about, do whatever he wanted, get paid for his work. So we are sort of leaning toward he was probably freed at some point, but we just don't know yet. And we think we'll probably find out when he was freed. Yeah.
That's awesome.
So part of the wonderful thing is that Dr. Stribling, who started Mountain View Farm, kept a farm journal for 20 years, from 1820 to 1840 something, where every single day he made an entry.
Every single day.
Right. So Karen has a vision of being able to do all kinds of good things with that, of being able to see what daily life was like for the enslaved people and so forth. But right now we're going through it, and we've been able to find some things that tie these stories together here, and we'll show you. So this is what the farm journal looks like. And the very, very first reference to Windsor is in 1825. So he died in 1865 there at the farm. So that's 40 years, a 40-year period from when he first appeared. And as Darlene just said, the first reference is hired Windsor.
Right.
1825.
So that's the beginning of the documentation on Windsor and the family. So if Dennis, who gave the presentation here a month ago, he explains, and if he's on it, I know that he's seen all of this material, but Windsor's wife was Susan. So the first reference to Susan is actually a couple of years earlier in 1821. So Susan in Windsor, and she's there all the way through 1865 as well. So we have documentation in the journals of both of them being there on the farm and working. And then, I mean, you can see here just from this one little reference how there's the detail of what they were doing on an individual basis, you know, the enslaved people. So they're working in the garden there.
And we're thinking that Susan, and we're not sure who Ann is yet, but we're pretty sure that Susan was possibly enslaved, and that's why Windsor was around so much, and probably why he passed away there, because his family was still there. So we're thinking that maybe Susan was enslaved, and yes.
Right.
That's amazing.
So here, when Dennis was on, and in the book, in the when we get back on video, we can show the King book, but Dennis and Darlene and everyone else has worked as a labor of love over all the years putting that together. And there's showing the Windsor was born and descended through on the white side, the Adams family, and then the Ashby family. So we have documentation here of Windsor being hired from Betsy Ashby, and you know, tying that connection to the Ashby family, and Betsy Ashby's son was Alfred Ashby, this AA
Ashby.
So we have tied through the archives of the documents, you know, made that tie back that justifies and documents what Dennis and what appears in the book. And here's that tied to the Albert A. Ashby, and you can see again the piece in the box there is transcribed what's written, and this is Dr. Stribling writing, got Albert Ashby's machine to thrash wheat. Then the next day they're thrashing wheat, and Curry, James, and Windsor are working it. So you can see Windsor, and you can see the tie to Albert Ashby, and they're there on the farm, so you can get a little glimpse of a day in the life.
October 26, 1840.
Yeah. So that's 15 years. So and you know, by this point in time, Windsor and Susan have children there, and everything else. And this is actually something that came from online. It's an article which is quite amazing. You can look at it yourself, and it's about Windsor, and I'll let Darlene talk about it.
I mean, they say he's an old Negro man, Windsor King. He's 82 years old, and this is 1855. Sold last fall 2.5 bushels rye on a piece of land cleared by himself 14 years ago, and has had the same piece of land in cultivation ever since up to this time. He threshed out his crop on Wednesday last, and it yielded 101 bushels. This is the largest yield we have ever heard of from the quantity sown. So what's interesting about this is a couple things. One is they don't describe him as owned by anyone.
That's right.
And the second thing is this is his property that he's had for 14 years. So this, you know, so this also makes us believe that he was probably a free man, because he's not described as a slave or owned by anyone, and that he has his own property.
And this reference to Piedmont Station, for people that know Upper Fauquier County, Piedmont Station's Delaplane. Is what's called Delaplane today. So it's in the Adams and that road
Okay.
which basically connects Markham to the Delaplane area. So that Piedmont Station is a reference that's very nearby. So that's yeah, as you say, it's quite remarkable to have that.
And it made the Alexandria Gazette.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Must have been quite a man, Windsor.
Mhm.
It was.
That's it's impressive. So then the following page is, and this is one of the, in all of the Your Names project perspective, this document is probably the single most important document there is. So it's the enslaved people in the tax record, putting together the tax record in 1861.
And I think, I wanted to interrupt you.
Yes,
I
please.
think it's important because I guess the amount of taxes they would be paid on
Right.
each person.
Right.
And what's different, I mean, it's usually described as a slave schedule. And typically it's described in their slave schedule as male,
That's right.
age,
Right.
black or mulatto or whatever,
No name.
and no name.
Yes, right.
What I thought was interesting and which I'm so grateful for is that they actually named their slaves.
Yes.
And they also had a formula here that also explained who was children. So anybody that you see in parentheses is a child. And so, and you can, in going through the names project,
Right.
you can pretty much,
Yeah,
deduce
connect.
down to the fact that whose child is who
That's right.
by using oral history.
That's right. That's
So
right.
it's really, really, I'm so grateful that they had, they would actually name their slaves. And that's just like a gold mine for people
Yeah.
like us,
Yes. People doing genealogy.
Yeah.
Confirmation.
So between Darlene and Dennis, they were able to identify, and I mean right off the top of their heads.
Yeah.
What is it? 1, 2, they're highlighted in yellow here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
Yeah.
6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 different members of the King family that were there in 1861. So there's 3 different farms listed. We'll get into this a little bit later. The Buck farm is almost like right in this town of Hume. And we'll see that on a map in a minute. Priestley Farm, which will reference the Thumb Run Church, which is and Darlene can explain the Priestley tie there. And then Mountain View Farm, that's the one that we showed to start with, that's in Markham.
Okay.
So the 2 different groups of the family in 2 of those farms, but it really is. This is the key, and you'll see it. We use it a little bit later for a different family, but this document really is the key, and it's close enough to when the emancipation came,
Right.
and everybody on this list, we can tie back, the families
Right.
from freedom back to the enslaved time. So the good news, moving on from this one, this is 1861. In 2 years was the emancipation, and 2 years after that is 1865, and the Civil War is over. But in the documentation in the archives keeps going, and we'll show what happens next. So 1865, the King family moves to their new home. So
Oh, that's amazing that they would have a home that they could move into property.
yeah, I mean, it's just wonderful. So, and the fact that we have the documentation, that's the day, June 2nd, 1865. Susan, she's the mom. And of course, by now she's probably the grandmom of some of these people, you know what I
Right.
mean? And Emily and
Toll.
Evelina, right? Oh, Bayless.
Mhm.
They left to their new home and then paid tall $5 work. If you heard Dennis's, talk a month ago, he talked about tall. So he had been around and he came back or ended up on the farm. We'll show you his house. But this last part, the horses loaned to William Ash. So Dennis said, talked to him this week, and William Ash was married to Emily that's on this list. So that's the
Yeah.
husband
Mhm.
loaned the horses. I'm sure there's a cart or a wagon, and that was the moving van in 1865.
Right. So he loaned them
Yeah,
his wagon to move into their house.
that's amazing, beautiful.
So I think that's really great that, and you look at it, it's June, so Windsor had just passed away after 93 years. So
Mhm.
now they're moving to their new home.
And that's the house.
Yeah, that's the house that we don't know what house they were moving to. They could have been moving to just don't know. But that's Tall King's house that where he lived after the Civil War, and he had that. And so you can see that
Still standing.
yeah.
Handsome house.
Yeah, that's a fine house.
It
Mhm.
is, it is. Surrounded by the mountains.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can see it today if you're driving from Markham to Hume down 688.
Mhm.
And oops, sorry, one more. So this Darlene's tied the family to the churches.
Yes. So as many of you probably don't know, Mount Morris, most of the enslaved at the time came into formed the church, Mount Morris Baptist Church, which is a church I'm a member of. And I just thought it would be interesting because they named the slaves that had been going to the white church, which was the Thumb Run Primitive Baptist Church. And they named each of this is just the male list of the names of the males. And the highlighted ones is Peter King.
Okay.
And the last one is Henry King. So they were instrumental in starting Mount Morris Baptist Church. And then later on, Peter started Mount Perrin.
Oh, okay.
On
Up
the
on the
mountain.
mountain.
Mhm.
Yeah. African mountain.
Which is Africa Mountain.
Right, yes. The Baltimore's.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So we'll be sorry to interrupt. We'll be brave here and we'll stop this share. And I think we wanted to
We'll see if anyone has any questions that they might have at this time. Any of our viewers, if you have any questions.
so we wanted to show a couple of things. This
I can see there's a question in the chat.
all right, so this is an example of one of the items from the archive. It's a ledger book from one of the Dr. Ledger books, and we just wanted to be able to show this off and so that you could see what we're looking at to find this information. There's several other documents in there. So I think there's a question up here.
Okay.
Is there a question in the chat?
So
Okay, yeah. I have been looking because it was two things that we wanted to verify. We have found out that oral history, there's always a grain of truth in it. So I know what he's talking about.
What's the question?
can everyone
I'm
see
sorry. The question is Caroline, which came, his grandmother or great grandmother was Caroline, which came from the archives. I have been trying to get as much information about her as possible, but my efforts to do so that at the State Archives in Richmond proved fruitless. Darlene and Jim, I would appreciate it if you would happen to run across any references to my great grandmother Caroline.
Okay.
Dr. Robert Stribling's wife was also named Caroline, by the way, or Albert for that matter, I would be most appreciative. I'm living in Portugal, so it's not convenient to call, but you can reach me. Okay, so yeah, so Fred, hi, how are you doing? Okay, so yes, and I had called Dennis, I think last week or the week before, and I tried to get information as to when Caroline and your great-grandfather were married, so that we could look through the diaries and maybe pinpoint the time, and then we could verify some of the stuff that we have. It's a lot of information, so I can't always remember where I read something. But if we can narrow it down to the years that, like, for instance, when Caroline and Albert got married, because you referenced that, we referenced the teacups that was given to them as wedding presents. So we know that if we can narrow it down to that, we can confirm your history. So just give us some time. We'll keep looking. We have a lot of documents to go through. I'm sure we'll come across something that we can share with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So there's a couple others. Was there a school at Mountain View? There was a school in the neighborhood called the Abbey, where the Stribling kids went to school. There wasn't a Stribling family cemetery.
They're all built at Leeds.
Yeah,
Buried at Leeds Episcopal.
at Leeds. And then there's Kaya Jackson was my
grandmother. Kaya Jackson was my grandmother Gaskins' father and grandfather's nickname. Her other grandfather, Marshall Whittingham, is buried at Mount Morris. He is.
Yeah. So there's a good Kaya Gaskins connection in there, like we said, and the two families obviously were neighbors, and it's interesting to know, and I mean, good to see that the free black families and the white families, they were doing business back and forth, just like, yeah.
That's great.
So you want to?
So do you want to pause the questions?
Sure.
Or do we have another?
No, that's it. That's all that's here right now.
Okay. So now we know that the goal of the landowners was to make a profit.
Mm-hmm.
So did your research show whether or not slaveholders were sensitive to the needs of those who were enslaved, or if there were any resistances from those who were enslaved? What were their relationships like?
We found both.
Yeah, we did. Mm-hmm.
So tell us about that.
Yeah, so I guess the slides, everyone's seeing the slides, are still up, right? So the first that we found, Darlene and I, we called it the human side.
Yeah, because we don't want everybody just to see these people as slaves. They were people, and they had feelings and desires, and they did things to bring whatever kind of relief from slavery they could get. So
that's true.
We found some examples here of them showing their human side.
That's right.
Yeah.
They had lives just like everybody else.
Right.
And they lived and had families.
They made the best of a bad situation.
Yes.
So hold on one second. Bear with us.
You sound like almost.
All right, we can see it. So let me back up one. Oh, 1 second.
What slide are we at?
17.
That's a good one.
Mhm.
One more.
Yeah, that's it.
Is it shown?
No, not here.
Shown now?
No. The show. Okay. Mine is strange. Let me see if anyone else.
Let's go to, what if we go- oops.
Yeah,
Show 'em.
it's getting ready to come up in a few minutes.
Okay.
We thank you for bearing with us.
It's not up yet, but it's coming.
Yeah, it's coming soon.
Well, if
Well, we can talk about.
we would have been lost without the technology.
Amen, amen.
Okay.
We need to go back one more.
All right, we'll go back one.
Yeah.
All right, so as we were saying,
No,
the
it's showing the presentation mode, not, I mean, the preview. It's not showing it. It's the-
maybe we're there, maybe we're not there.
I think it's delayed.
Are they seeing it yet?
Okay, we're there now.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you for bearing with us, as we said. So so this first example, we're going to have more on this later, but we call this Christmas Vacation. So Ned and Ag are two of the enslaved people. So this is the entry in the journal, December 19th. Ned and Ag went over the ridge to return Sunday. So over the ridge was Dr. Stribling's phrase for the Blue Ridge. So going over the ridge is over the mountain to
Winchester.
right, Winchester and Clark County. So his family was from over there. So so the math works out. They left on Tuesday the 19th to return on Sunday, December 24th. So I mean, Karen, I don't know if how unusual this is or how common it is, but they were given a week holiday and went home essentially. Yeah, because Dr. Stribling had moved to Markham from there.
Right.
So,
The one thing that I have found is like from Christmas Day to New Year's.
oh, okay,
it's normal break time.
all right.
Well, these people sort of went different places at different times whenever they wanted to.
So we actually did some more research on this because we know more about Ned, and we'll talk about more of that here coming up. So remember this entry. So a second entry that kind of showed the human side was going to the association.
Right.
So,
And so that the association was for the Association.
Yes.
Okay. Now, this is, of course, in 1825. So there is no second National Catoctin Baptist Association that we were. This is the one that Thumb Run was a participant in. So August 18th, which is still to this day is when the Association for Second National is celebrated in August every year. So these slaves are going to the commencement for the association, which is a few days. So they're gone, and then it breaks up after a couple of days and they're coming back home. So, and then the church that they used, because during that time, there weren't a lot of churches. So they used one church building and every denomination used that one church. So this is where they were going up to
church on the hill in Markham.
in Markham. Right.
The Methodists use it to this day.
Was it a Methodist church?
The people are getting it.
Hello.
Okay.
We're back.
Share.
Okay.
We are back.
$120.
Somebody talking.
Never had this much trouble before. It's getting worse. It's getting worse.
All right. We're working on the assumption that we're back. So we talked about going to the association. I hope you all
Yes.
heard that.
The church.
So this next example of the human side, we got a lot more research to do on this one.
Right, we
'Cause
do.
we found this and we got more questions than answers. But there's a man, Charles, who's we're not even sure what his status was, free or he's there. This is a lot more complicated than we
Mhm.
thought.
Yeah, we're not sure what's going on here, because Charles is determined to go to Missouri with his wife.
So-
Missouri.
So I'm thinking that maybe she's owned by someone else and they're going to Missouri and they're
Hmm.
taking her with them. And
Hmm.
he's determined to go.
So that, yeah, that's literally what Dr. Stribling wrote. Charles determined to go to Missouri with his wife, and I accordingly let him off for $350.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So it reads as though Charles is buying the freedom of either his own freedom or his wife's freedom.
Right.
And that's in
Hmm.
going to Missouri. So I'm
Yeah.
sure these things are documented somewhere. So we
keep
got
reading.
to do some more research,
Right.
but I mean, it's a great thing. So, you know,
Hmm.
Charles came up to Dr. Stribling and said, I'm going to Missouri. I want to take my wife.
Yeah.
He said, all right, $350.
Hmm.
So I guess that's the way it worked. If Charles, there is documentation of Charles working. And even my father, I remember my father, I found in the records, my father is like, got questions about Charles because he's taking wheat for sale down to Alexandria and down to Falmouth, Fredericksburg.
Yeah.
And he's collecting the money and he's getting
Hmm.
paid and
Hmm.
Yeah. And he goes with
He's a
the,
businessman.
yeah, he
Yeah.
goes with the Striblings.
the harvest.
Yeah, he goes with, yeah, he just goes, you know,
Hmm.
and
Good job.
so we're not sure what his, but then, like we said before, there's several things that we've read in these journals.
Mhm.
We're not sure what type of relationship they really had because they had so much autonomy.
Yeah.
You know, it's, you know, some of them could, I mean, they just go where they want to go.
When they chose to go.
But if you want to
They
talk
had-
about the human side, there's nothing more human than
Wanting to be with your wife.
That's right.
going to Missouri.
Yeah, right.
Hmm.
So that's kind of, you asked about the human side, but you also asked about resistance.
Yes.
So this
Tell us
poster
about
and
it.
broadside is here at the museum, and you can see there the list of the enslaved people that have gone to freedom, run away. And you can see on the broadside the list of the owners, the enslavers, the white people, James K. Marshall and
Hmm.
R.M. Stribling is Dr. Stribling and E.L.S. Marshall. So the part of the beauty of the various families working together is we can connect the dots on the owner side
Yeah.
of the
So,
picture.
so you have the two Marshalls and the Striblings, and they
Right.
each have their enslaved that have run off.
Hmm.
So now we're going to show you how that's all connected.
So this is a map, and my father, bless his heart, put this map together.
Hmm.
And you can see on the right is J.K. Marshall. That's James Keith Marshall,
Hmm.
son of the Chief Justice John Marshall, famous in
Mm.
Fauquier history. Then on the left at the top is J.A. Marshall, Jacqueline Ambler Marshall, another son. So those two are brothers,
Hmm.
right?
Mhm.
And the brothers inherited slaves with the land from their father. So that's one family connection right off the bat. And then underneath that J.A. Marshall, you see Buck Farm. And we talked earlier about Buck Farm belonged to Dr. Stribling. So this William Clarkson was his wife's father. So he inherited that farm. So we'll dazzle, don't try and keep track of this, but we'll just show you the interconnectedness on the white side. So this William Clarkson has two daughters. One of them's married to Robert Stribling. One of them's married to this J.A. Marshall.
Mhm.
E.L.S. She's the widow of Jacqueline Marshall. So
Hmm.
those two are sisters. Two of them are brothers. This James Keith Marshall, two of his children married two of Dr. Stribling's children.
Wow.
So
Hmm.
all
Really
you can
interesting.
see how they all get, so if the white families are that interconnected over a couple generations, you can
Mhm.
imagine on the
Yeah.
enslaved side,
That's right.
you got three
Mhm.
farms here that all touch
Mhm.
each other.
That's right.
They've been together for a couple of generations. So these people that
Mhm.
left, if they're
Mhm.
not brothers, they're first cousins,
Right.
second cousins,
Yeah.
or they knew each other from the day they were born.
Mhm.
Yeah, because all the farms connect.
They do.
They
Mhm.
they
They
all
border.
connect.
They
Yeah,
border one another.
right.
So
Hmm.
if you, and Karen was talking about it earlier, when you look over on the owner side of the fence, you can find a lot
Yeah, a
more
lot of
information and
information.
kind of tie these stories together that, when you look at that broadside of the runaway, it doesn't really tell the story until you piece together how all those families are connected in the farm. So
Mhm.
I know that Karen is working hard on the on the map of showing the vision of showing how,
Mhm.
all the farms where the enslaved people
Yeah,
lived and
that's
being able to
right.
show that in a map. So
Mhm.
it's coming.
And Dr. Stribling took such good notes.
Oh,
Whoa,
yes.
we're all lucky
That's
for
so
that.
valuable.
And I always say, I wonder if he realized that we would be reading
Yeah.
them 200 years later. I don't think he wrote
might
it.
have thought
He
maybe
didn't wrote it
100.
for us, but
He
we
probably figured 100 years.
yeah.
So
My son.
somebody asked, this last thing is kind of a demonstration of both the human side of the relationship and resistance. And somebody asked the story earlier about Albert and Caroline. So that,
Yeah, so our cousin Fred, this is his line, Albert and Caroline, and he was asking a question about finding out more about her. I am certain that we're going to find out a lot more about Caroline and Albert, but it's day by day, page by page, and it's a lot of information. So the oral history is that Caroline and Albert were married at the Striblings, and they gave them these teacups as a gift.
The Striblings gave them.
Yes, and we still have those cups. So I'm trying to, and that's what I was saying. I was trying to narrow down when they got married, because I'm certain that he documented this wedding. I know he did, you know. So I'm hoping that, you know, I run across this. I'm trying to narrow down about when they would have gotten married, and then I can confirm this, you know.
I'm sure the information is there.
Oh, it's definitely there. I mean,
pages.
he documents
Yeah.
everything.
That's awesome. It's a blessing.
Yes, yes, it is.
Mhm.
So that shows the kind of relationship. Obviously, they thought a lot of Caroline.
Yeah.
You know that, you know, they gave her these teacups, one for him and one for her.
So I know that we lost some time on the technical stuff. So you want to skip on the questions now?
And if we have time later.
We'll do it at the end.
Appreciate
So
Mhm.
people have been very patient out there.
Mhm.
So we talked earlier about Ned and Ag, and as soon as the second Darlene saw this list of names, she said, "Well, I know who Ned is."
Mhm.
So tell the story from
Yeah, one of the associate pastors at Mount Morris Baptist Church was Reverend Alfonso Washington, and he had written a book, All in God's Time. And in his book, he had talked about his, I guess that would be his great grandfather, Ned. And he had said that Ned, my paternal great grandfather, Ned Washington, came back to Virginia following the emancipation after being sold and carried to Kentucky as a slave. He said great grandfather Ned lived in a cabin up on the hill on the same property with my grandfather. So that was his oral history. So what was really exciting for us was we look at this history and the slaves that are named. And on the Buck farm, you see the first person is one of the first people is Ned. And then you see Aggie. But the one in parenthesis is Phil. And Phil is their son. And Phil is the grandfather of Reverend Washington. So we can confirm what he says. We'll get to that later, but we can confirm about Ned being sold to Kentucky, which is, we understand now where that came from, because in his book, he says he was sold and he walked back after the emancipation. So let's go forward.
Sure.
So that's Phil Washington. That's Reverend Washington's grandfather. And he's also was the third pastor of Mount Morris Baptist Church.
And you probably recognize the other person, George Washington. So one of the first things we were talking about was not only the Kentucky part of the story, but just the name Washington.
So we were saying, where did they get this Washington last name? I had a whole different idea, didn't I, Jim?
Yeah, where did this Washington last name came from? So we looked at the documents that we had. So remember Ned and Ag going over the Christmas vacation. So that's a highlighted part. But then we kept looking through this journal, and we have not gone through every date in the journal. But this is Ned continuously going to Winchester. So Ned's in Winchester. Ned went to Winchester. Ned returned from Winchester. Ned in Winchester. Down to, so he's got family. He's just visiting.
Something's going on in Winchester.
Something's going on in Winchester. So the question is, what's in Winchester? Well, the Washingtons are in Winchester. The white Washingtons are in Winchester. So you can see on this screen, Lawrence A. Washington's house. This is Old Town Winchester that's shown there on this little map. You go to Winchester today, you can see George Washington's old office. It's like a museum. You can see where George Washington's office, you can visit it. So this Lawrence A. Washington, see it highlighted there, was the nephew of George Washington. And he lived there in Winchester until 1811, when he moved to a place called Kanawha County in West Virginia.
It's now West Virginia. It
Yeah,
used
now
to be
West
Virginia.
Used to be Virginia. So that's a strange place. Why would anyone move from Winchester to that place? It's because George Washington, his uncle George, George Washington had been given, actually by the British, for fighting in the French and Indian War, 200,000 acres of land on the Kanawha River. So this Lawrence Washington was a nephew of George and was named in his will and inherited land out on this river. So he had the bottom land, the best river land. And this river goes all the way from what is Charleston, West Virginia, all the way to the Ohio River. So it's a tremendous amount of land. So he received that and went out there as documented. So you see the map, the picture of the map here.
Yeah.
It shows that map, if you can see it on your screens, the red dot is where they moved to. It's now in current day West Virginia, but on the border of the Ohio River and Kentucky.
Right.
Right.
Kentucky again.
Right
Yes.
at one county away from Kentucky.
That's awesome.
So more documentation. Okay, that makes sense for the Washingtons, but what about the Striblings? Well, the Stribling family and the Washington family out in Frederick County, Winchester, were connected. Dr. Stribling's grandfather and George Washington himself had like a business relationship for like 30 years. And George Washington offered him a commission as a colonel in the Revolutionary War. They did land business and so forth. And Dr. Stribling's aunt in Frederick County was a Washington. His aunt Frances Washington was a daughter of Warner Washington, who was first cousin of George Washington. So the two families were connected. And in 1811, when Lawrence Washington went out to Kanawha, Dr. Stribling's father, Thomas Stribling, went with him. And lo and behold, thanks to these archives that we have, we know who else went. Ned and Ag.
Who was his wife.
So Dr. Stribling went out to Kanawha, but his father went out to Kanawha and so was his brother. So in the archives in 1831, Dr. Stribling's brother William sent him a letter, and in the letter he's talking about the land. So you got 50 acres here and you got 40, because he had inherited, his father had passed away, and you got 200 acres and blah, blah, blah. So he's writing about the land, and he says in the letter, the brother says in the letter to William, to Dr. Stribling, I have planted a small orchard of 30 apple trees of the best grafted fruit on the second bottom, the bottom land, at the place where Ag and Ned lived when you were in this country. When you were out, so Dr. Stribling was out there in 1818, and that's where Ag and Ned were living. So this oral history of being out in Kentucky and walking back, lo and behold, through these archives, we can show it.
That's just extraordinary.
And
it's marvelous.
we don't know, we have so much more to learn, but I'm sure there's many more details to these stories to be found, but we thought this was a great place to stop.
Yeah, you have a treasure there.
Yeah, we tied it all together.
We want to thank your father Jim
Bill.
for his Bill. I'm sorry, Jim. Your father Bill for his diligent work.
Yeah,
Diligent thing.
pulling all this together.
Yeah.
So I don't know, I guess we're on screen, and I don't know if you have time or where you are, but
Well, on the clock, we have a minute.
oh,
But I was wondering, doing your research, is there anything that you question but have not been able to find the answer to?
oh,
Is that mostly to do with the Kings? or-
Yeah, well, my big question is, where did the Kings get their surname,
Yeah,
King?
right.
And we're pretty certain we're gonna find something,
Yeah.
you know, on where that came from. I mean,
Yeah.
it might take us a little while,
Yeah.
but we're gonna keep looking.
Mm.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and we're good. I mean, we have so much information on the Kings and now this Washington connection, but
That's right, that's
there's,
right.
if you look at that list from 1861, there's a lot of other names on there,
Right.
Mhm.
right?
That's
And I would love to be able to make connections for other people here in Fauquier
Mhm.
County. And now they're all over the United States
That's true.
that could make the same leap for their
Mhm.
families
Right.
and make that connection back to,
And the roots going
yeah,
back to-
back, and be able to show, no, this isn't Jane, it's Jane so-and-so.
Right,
Mhm.
right. Jane
Yeah.
has the last name.
And right,
Yeah.
Ah,
right.
and Jane has a family.
Mhm.
Yeah,
So that's
they're
what-
connected to.
That's what I'd love to be able to do.
Yeah. There are no questions in the chat room.
So I don't know anything about how to find questions in the chat room. So somebody else can tell us that.
I need it. Thank you.
Oh, I see.
Oh, Jerry's here.
In the chat room.
Uh,
It's still on screen thing.
Motion, thank yous.
All right, we got a lot of people saying thank you, thank you, thank you.
Good.
And then
good.
from 15 minutes ago, people saying we lost you, you're back.
Let's see, what she say? Was a question up there.
Hold on. I see one right here. My paternal ancestor's last name was Stribling. My great grandfather was Jake Stribling and his granddaughter was Annie Stribling. Where can I find more information? Well,
We'll have
that's
to
our
see.
job.
Yeah.
This is our job, Darlene and I and the people here at AAHA. That's exactly what we're trying to do.
I think we've seen another question up here. Somebody
Okay.
was asking me something.
I think they were the early ones.
Yeah, those we've answered, I think.
Somebody asked me. Okay, I know that. Yep.
There might be one further down. Keep going down. So
Family lore and legend has my Gaskins grandmother meeting my Turner grandfather at Stribling Farm.
wow.
Wow, didn't we see some Turners? We
Yeah,
saw
so Turner
Yeah.
Ashby, there's a Turner family, but there's also Turner Ashby
Hmm.
who was connected and friends with the Gaskin family, which Karen knows.
And said, was it a Methodist or a Quaker church? What, it was no. Are you talking about the church? I guess they're asking about the church was Thumb Run was a primitive Baptist church if you're talking about Thumb Run.
And the one at Markham was
Yeah.
multi-denominational. So
Every
all the,
denomination used it.
Isn't that awesome?
Yeah,
so
Back then.
yeah.
So we should say one more thing about churches while we're on. So my family, I attend Leeds Church as we talked about, and our family has for whatever 200 years, and Darlene's family's been at Mount Morris Church since the Mount Morris Church was founded. But one of the great things in the last couple of years, other than Darlene getting together with my family and doing the research, is
Mhm.
the two churches getting together.
Yeah,
So
and
that-
yeah, because it's funny because a lot of which I thought was interesting is that the people enslaved on the plantations,
Yeah.
they were attending Thumb Run, which was a primitive Baptist church,
Mhm.
which was not close
Yeah.
to well, in some cases, in some plantations, it was close. But if you're talking about Markham, it was quite a
Yeah.
distance to
Yeah.
get to
Get the
Thumb Run,
Mhm.
which was near the Priestley plantation. That's where
Mhm.
Thumb Run started out. But the enslavers attended Leeds Episcopal. So they were allowed on Sundays to go to attend the Thumb Run Church, which was quite a distance. And I think I read somewhere, I don't know which journal I was in. I've been reading this stuff forever, but they would allow them to use the wagon to go to church at Thumb Run. Now I read that. I think Bill gave me that information. And so I was like, okay, so they were able to go to church over there on, which is now 647, which is Crest Hill Road, to attend church.
It sounds like they had a lot of flexibility.
So,
It really does.
Everything
But the-
depends on the mindset and heart of the slaveholders.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
That's
you'll
true.
find laws that were written and
Mhm.
laws that were enforced and not enforced, depending on the control and the mindset and heart of the slaveholder,
Mhm.
and whether or not there was a threat of insurrection or resistance.
Right.
so
I have a
the,
question
oh.
about the Cook family. Any connection to the Cook family, Haley family with the other farms?
we'll look.
I don't see.
So
Cook.
the Haley family is so tightly connected in there. I mean, it just has to be.
I'm trying to remember what I remember about them.
I know one of the Gaskins married a Haley.
Is that
I-
is that the end of
Eliza-
that?
Joe Haley he was a big man in Markham when I was growing up.
Joe Haley.
So it
So-
looks like we'll
so-
have to have you come back.
Give us some time. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, give us
We
some
much
time.
appreciate it.
This has really been a delight. This is remarkable research. I mean, that your great grandfather,
Great grandfather.
great grandfather kept these meticulous records and
Yeah.
recorded everything.
And I think they kind of passed down. They all did it.
And
Yeah, it
the-
came
the
down
one
through.
thing for me is that it clearly shows our history
Yeah, it
Mhm.
does.
and the
it does.
ability for us to come together at a table and to research and to talk about our
That's
history.
right. That's
Mhm.
And
right.
to me, that part is so important
It
today.
is. It
Right.
is. In our common history.
Yeah,
So,
because we're so intertwined,
we are,
Yeah.
yeah.
more so than we realize.
Right. Than some of us want to admit. But we
Right.
are, and the history shows, and it's documented in these records,
Right.
and records that we collect here at AAHA. So again, we thank you so much, Jim and Darlene, for joining us.
And for many people, it brings closure and understanding of
That's right.
one's history and heritage that has not always been passed down by written documents in one
Right.
place.
Right.
That's true.
And I think that's what was so rewarding for us, was to be able to confirm oral
Yeah,
history.
That's right.
So, you hear these stories and we don't know if it's true or not, but that's
Right.
what grandma said, and then you find out that grandma, she might have missed some things, but
Yeah.
she was, pretty much,
Yeah,
she was
Jesus.
correct.
Mhm.
There was
Yeah.
an aunt, one of daddy's older sisters talked about the connection with the Marshall family. And I just blew her off. One day,
Uh-huh.
someone brought a copy of a will, unprobated will of Hezekiah Gaskins in 1854, where he was going to emancipate his wife and 3 daughters. And his good friend Turner Ashby was going to be the administrator, executor of his estate.
Mhm.
Now, of course, he didn't die until 1870.
Two more questions.
All right.
Okay, what does this say?
So we got 2 more questions. We'll look.
Okay, I think we answered that. Insurance of cups, right? We say if it's
So did any of the information come from the National Archives? So none
No.
of that
Mm-mm.
came from the National Archives, no.
Okay.
There's a question about the cups,
Yeah,
darling.
it says Albert and Caroline did leave them behind when they escaped from slavery. The sentimental value of them was such that they subsequently purchased a duplicate set. Okay, I did not know that.
Oh, okay.
Okay, because the pattern was widespread, but my cousin Lynn Scott has a set. Okay. One of the Marshall sons left land to my great grandmother Fanny Gaskins. We believe it is now Naked Mountain Vineyards. Is
That's
that
right.
Karen says yes.
Edward Carrington Marshall.
huh?
Edward
Carrington
Carrington Marshall,
Oh, that's okay.
1870. He also gave 25 to the Wells family.
Hmm.
Well,
Oh,
you
okay.
are correct.
Yeah. So what happened to it? Good afternoon. Caught the last few minutes. I'm in Jersey and work. I am Colston with ancestors Nickens and Dangerfield. Oh, wow.
Oh.
We know a lot about the Dangerfield.
You please,
What I
the
saw was
Nickens,
great. Okay.
let me, we're on, this
So
book
yeah.
right here is full of the Nickens family. So the Nickens family,
We're always free people.
yeah, they were free and they're renting land from the Striblings and
Mhm.
doing business with the Striblings.
Hmm.
So, I mean, through the museum, it's all been copied here, right? And it's all here. And it's indexed. So Karen has it indexed, and I don't know if it's online yet, but you'll be able to find, and also there's Dangerfield restaurants back, before the Civil War of a danger. I mean, the first initial, I think, was A. Dangerfield out in Hume.
Right.
And-
With the
right.
blacksmith.
Yeah,
Anthony.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Anthony Dangerfield. So there's documentation on both those families.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, yeah, we do have some information on that.
So looks like we got all the questions.
I think we got all the questions. Yeah.
Thank everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
And we
you.
thank everybody for coming and joining us today. And I'm sure you were enriched by all this information that we have available. In April, we'll be focusing on migration. And we'll talk first on April 14th to Victoria Johnson, who is a relative of Karen White and Angela Davidson.
Mhm.
And they live in Newport, Rhode Island, and they'll tell us about how their ancestors migrated there.
Oh, okay.
And on the 26th, we'll talk to Brenda Pitts Fuller, who was reared in Warrenton and relocated to DC. And she'll talk about her Pitts roots, as well as the roots of the Fullers, the family she married into on April 26th. So
Okay.
thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you then. God bless you.
Thank you. Turn it off. Oh, we turn it off.
I can go and unzoom.
Leave.